Today we're going to be talking about ini files and startup switches. They're very powerful ways that we can control how Keystroke works. I'd like to welcome you to Keystroke Live. We do this every week, every Thursday, 9 o'clock Mountain Time. And it's the same time, same place, same login information. We have different topics that we discuss every week. And the first Thursday of every month is hosted by our president, Michael Gebb. So let's start talking about startup switches. I have to tell you, even as long as I've been here, the help files are extremely good with discussing what these switches are and how they work. And I still refer to them. I can't remember every single switch all the time, but there are some very common ones. The first thing you want to remember is there's kind of a hierarchy or priorities of how these switches work. The highest priority is what's on the target line, which we call startup switches. So that's going to take priority or override anything in your WS, generally register number .ini file, which is specific to each register, each computer, which that will also override what's in just the basic ws.ini file. You want to be careful. You don't want to purposely, create conflicts or give Keystroke differing information, but it gives you an idea of how Keystroke works, what it looks at. The ini files do allow for more options in Keystroke compared to startup switches. So if you can't do something on a target line, you can probably do it in an ini file. The advantage with ini files versus startup switches is you can back up those ini files. You still do need to track which computer is calling out which ini file, but you can back those up much easier than backing up or documenting what's on your target line for every computer. And that's really important when you're switching computers or changing out a computer or, replacing a workstation, something like that. So basically, ini files and startup switches allow you to have different settings on different computers. Some examples are the configuration and appearance, and that can be anything from parameters, toolbars, background colors, what the title bar it says, cache drawer settings, all of that can be set in, with ini files or startup switches. You could also have different printer settings and print button settings on different computers with the use of these switches, as well as different pin pads and signature capture configurations on different computers or lack thereof. Again, the help files and is very helpful, as well as in the files folder in Keystroke, there is a ws.ini that gives you an idea of almost all of the possible settings that Keystroke can use. And probably the easiest way to set this up is use unique register switches on every computer, which will then, based on the register switch, will call out a WS with that register number .ini file. Or you can just call out just an ini file equal on the target line, and give the full path to where the INI file is located. In most cases, that's going to be in your data folder by default, but maybe in a multi-store environment or something like that, you might want to have a separate folder that's just for INI files. So I want to take a look. First, we're going to take a look at what the INI file looks like in the files folder. So you can kind of get an idea of some of the things that are available. So this is a file that's in the files folder. It's quite extensive. Gives you just some information and most of what you can do. Things like border style, title, what icon it's going to use. You can control fonts. You can control colors. You can control what your status bar is, the fonts. You can control how, if you have pictures in Keystroke, how they work. You can also set scaling on the computer for how big you want your fonts and that sort of thing, and the fonts you want to use. You can control sounds that Keystroke can use for all kinds of different things in the program, like when something is saved, or if the list is empty, or if somebody tries to scan an item and it's not found. All kinds of file settings. You can also tell Keystroke where, just like on the target line, where the data is, what toolbar files to use, what printer files to use, or forms files. You could control, whether there's a drawer, pin pad, signature capture device, that sort of thing. At the very bottom, these at the bottom of the list are generally only used in multi-store, but you can have Keystroke look for configuration in a different folder than maybe where your inventory is. You can have your customers in a different folder. Maybe in a multi-store environment, you're going to share the customer database, and they all look for the same customer database, but their inventory database may be different. So that gives you a really good idea of what is available for INI files. So now what I want to look at is the in the help files in Keystroke, what some of the things are that you can look at in the help files. So if you go to the index in our help files, you can type in startup, and you're going to have startup switches. Now, startup switches, remember, go on the target line. This describes the startup switches that are available. Most of them have an equivalent in the INI file setting and vice versa. Notice some of the switches begin with a /, some do not. Each of these have a link of what they do. So you can click on the link, it describes what it does, and it gives you great information on what's available that you can put on the target line. You don't necessarily have to use them, but they're very helpful in anything, especially if you have more than a single computer that uses Keystroke. You will be using startup switches or INI files. So this is the help for startup switches. If you go back to the index, type in INI files or INI, then we have a much longer list, as you can see, of things available in INI files, again with links on you know, what they do, how to set them up, and that sort of thing. So it's a great resource. As I said, I've been here for a long time, and I still refer to this almost daily, especially if there's something somebody wants to do that's, you know, a little bit out of the norm. Most of you have probably used things like printer switches and register switches and that sort of thing, possibly configuration switches or form switches for print buttons. Use these help files because that's what they're there for. So I'm going to open this up for questions. Pretty much, you know, I can answer specific questions on different INI files or startup switches or any other kind of questions you'd like. So does anybody have any questions on INI files or startup switches? Let's review this briefly then. There are priorities with INI files and startup switches. Startup switches are the highest priority. They will trump anything in INI files based on register number, as well as a default ws.ini. A lot more options in INI files than you do in startup switches. You can back up INI files with your data, which is a great way to save it. You can have different settings on different computers, things like configuration, appearance, printers, print buttons, pin pad, signature capture. Use the help files and the ws.ini file in the files folder to give you an idea of what's available. And on the target line, you can use just a /r and a number, which will call out a ws.number.ini file, or INI file equals. So any questions? I'd like to thank everybody for attending. Next week, you're going to have David Hunsinger with sales transaction types. That's going to be Thursday next week, same time, same place. And I hope everybody has a wonderful day.